The sun always seemed to shine a little brighter on the houses in Laurel Heights. The lawns were perfect, green carpets, and the driveways curved like quiet rivers past huge, beautiful homes. In the biggest house, on the very top of the hill, lived a man named Alistair Vance. He had made more money than most people could dream of, building clever apps and computer programs that people all over the world used. He could buy anything he wanted, but right now, the one thing he needed the most was something money couldn't fix. It was his dog, Atlas. Atlas was a German shepherd, a giant, handsome dog with wise eyes and a coat like dark gold. But those eyes were always scared. Alistair had gotten Atlas from a rescue place a year ago. The dog had been found in a bad situation, and the fear from those days never left him. In his new, gorgeous home, Atlas was like a ghost trapped in a palace. He would pace for hours, his nails clicking a worried rhythm on the marble floors. A car door slamming down the street would send him into a panic, howling a sad, scared song that echoed through the empty rooms. He would hide in his special kennel, which cost more than a car, and shiver. Alistair had tried everything. He hired famous dog trainers with television shows. They came with special collars and loud, firm voices, but Atlas would just curl up tighter. His tail tucked so far under it nearly disappeared. He paid for animal therapists who used calming sprays and played soft music. Nothing worked. The vet gave Atlas medicine, but it made the dog sleepy and slow, which wasn't the same as being happy or calm. Alistair felt a heavy knot of frustration in his chest. He was a man who solved impossible problems. Why couldn't he fix this? One evening, Alistair was hosting a big party for charity in his backyard. There were glowing lights, people in fine clothes laughing, and the sound of clinking glasses. But from inside the house, the lonely sound of Atlas's howling cut through the music. A woman in a sparkling dress made a joke. "Sounds like someone's having their own party in there, Alistair." She laughed. Alistair's face grew hot with embarrassment and anger. He felt like they weren't just laughing at his dog, but at him. In that moment, he didn't think. He just spoke. He climbed onto a small stage where a band had been playing and picked up a microphone. The chatter died down. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice loud and clear. "You can all hear my dog, Atlas. He's a good dog, but the world is too loud for him. I've spent a fortune trying to help him and gotten nowhere." He paused, looking at the crowd of rich, smiling faces. A wild idea took hold of him. "So I'm making it interesting. I will pay $1 million. $1 million to the person who can come here and truly calm my dog. Not drug him, not scare him into silence, but get him to be peacefully calm, here in my garden for 1 full hour. The challenge is open to anyone." The crowd gasped, then erupted into excited chatter. They thought it was a brilliant, fun stunt. For Alistair, it was deadly serious. The next day, the story was everywhere. On the news, on social media, people talked about the $1 million dog challenge. And just like Alistair expected, people started showing up at his big iron gates. It was a parade of strange and hopeful characters. A man from the desert arrived, saying he could communicate with animals using only his mind. He sat cross-legged in front of Atlas's kennel for 20 minutes before Atlas let out a particularly loud bark, making the man jump and leave in a hurry. A famous internet star came with 3 cameras, trying to get Atlas to play with expensive toys while talking loudly to her followers. Atlas hid in the far corner of his kennel, panting heavily. There was a woman with a suitcase full of crystals, placing them in a circle around the dog's area. A former military dog trainer came, his voice booming commands that made Atlas flatten his ears and show his teeth in fear, not anger. Each person failed. Each failure was filmed by the news helicopters that sometimes buzzed overhead or by phones poking through the fence. Atlas was becoming more famous and more miserable by the day. Watching from his giant window, Alistair felt the knot in his chest tighten. His big idea was making everything worse. The dog was more nervous, the lawn was getting trampled, and he was starting to look like a fool on television. He began to think the real problem was unsolvable. Maybe some broken things just stayed broken. He looked at Atlas, who was trembling under a bench, and for the first time, the billionaire's proud face showed something new. Not frustration, but a deep, sad helplessness. He had all the money in the world, but he couldn't give his best friend a single moment of peace. The challenge, meant to find a solution, was starting to feel like a very expensive, very public mistake. About 20 minutes away from the shining gates of Laurel Heights, the world looked and felt completely different. The houses were closer together, the cars were older, and the sounds were not of quiet fountains, but of neighbors talking and kids playing in the street. In a small, tidy apartment on the second floor of a brick building lived a mother and her daughter. The mother, Elena, worked from home at her computer, writing articles for websites and local magazines. It was a constant puzzle, trying to piece together enough work each month to pay the bills. But her real work, her most important job, was her 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was a quiet girl with thoughtful eyes that noticed everything. She saw the precise way a spider built its web in the corner of the window. She could hear the difference between the footsteps of the mail carrier and the neighbor downstairs. For Lily, the world was often a symphony played too loud, with all the instruments crashing together at once. The buzz of the fridge, the brightness of the sun, the scratchy tag on a shirt, it could all become too much, building into a wave that made her want to hide in her quiet, dark closet. Doctors had called it autism. For Elena and Lily, it was simply the way Lily was. She didn't speak with words, but she spoke in other ways. She had a tablet with a special program that helped her ask for things, and she could say, "Mama" and "home" in her own soft voice. But mostly, she communicated through doing. She would line her toy animals up in perfect straight rows by color and size. She would draw the same swirling, looping pattern for hours, the motion of the crayon soothing her mind. And she loved, more than anything, to go to the park. The park was their sanctuary. Every afternoon, if the weather allowed, Elena would take Lily and their small, scruffy terrier, Pip. Pip was getting old, his muzzle going gray, and he was the perfect friend for Lily. He was calm and slow, happy to just sit beside her. Elena would watch them from a bench. Lily would never run to the busy playground with the screaming children. Instead, she would find a patch of grass under her favorite oak tree. She would take out a small bag of smooth, flat stones she had collected and begin to arrange them. Not into a tower, but into a wide, careful spiral, like a snail's shell. She worked with a deep concentration, her small fingers placing each stone just so. Sometimes she would hum a single, gentle note over and over, a soft sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Pip would curl up at the edge of the stone spiral, sigh, and fall asleep in the sun. One evening, after a long day of work, Elena was scrolling through the news on her computer. A story popped up, one of those silly, rich people stories that felt like it was from another planet. Tech billionaire's $1 million dog challenge. The headline shouted. She almost clicked away, but a video started playing. It showed a magnificent German shepherd, trembling in a beautiful garden, while a man in a suit tried to offer him a piece of steak. The dog turned its head away, its whole body shaking. Elena's writer's mind clicked into gear. She read about the dog's history, his fear, his anxiety. She saw the parade of so-called experts failing. And then she looked across the room at her daughter. Lily was on the floor, carefully placing her colored pencils back into their box in the exact order of the rainbow. The overhead light was too bright for her, so she had pulled the brim of her favorite hat down over her eyes. She was in her own world, a world she built to be safe and predictable. A connection sparked in Ilana's mind, so strong it made her sit up straight. The billionaire's dog wasn't mean. He wasn't broken. He was overwhelmed. The world was too loud, too bright, too much for him. He needed quiet, not commands. He needed space, not pressure. He needed someone who didn't want anything from him. Isn't that exactly what Lily needed, too? The trainers on the news were trying to make the dog calm. They were an invasion. But what Lily did with old Pip, and even with Elena when she was upset, was different. She simply shared her calm. She created a little bubble of peaceful, predictable order and invited you into it. She never forced. She never demanded eye contact or a specific behavior. She just was. And in that space, fear could sometimes melt away. A crazy, impossible idea began to form. $1 million. That kind of money was a fantasy. It could mean a specialized school for Lily with teachers who understood her. It could mean therapies they could never afford. It could mean safety and security, but it wasn't just about the money. A fierce, protective feeling rose in Elena's chest. That poor dog. All those people gawking at him, shouting at him, trying to trick him. They didn't see him. They saw a problem or a paycheck. Lily would see a creature that was scared. Elena knew she would be laughed at. A poor single mother from the wrong side of town with a nonverbal daughter thinking they could solve a billionaire's problem? It was ridiculous, yet she couldn't let it go. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, she sat back at her computer. Instead of applying for another writing job, she opened a fresh email. She addressed it to the contact listed on the news article for Alistair Vance's office. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't write a long letter. She didn't list Lily's diagnosis or make big promises. She simply typed what she truly believed from one heart that understood anxiety to another. The subject line read, "For Atlas." The message was just 3 sentences. Asterisk, your dog isn't broken. He just speaks a different language. My daughter understands that language. Asterisk, she added her name and phone number. Before she could lose her nerve, she hit send. The email whooshed away into the digital night, a tiny message in a bottle tossed into a vast, uncaring ocean. She shut her laptop and went to check on Lily, certain she would never hear a thing back, but feeling a little better for having tried. Alistair Vance's assistant was a very practical woman. Her job was to sort through the mountain of emails, letters, and voicemails that poured in about the $1 million dog challenge. Most were easy to delete. There were long-winded theories from self-proclaimed animal psychics, aggressive notes from angry dog lovers calling him a cruel man, and thousands of videos of people's own pets doing cute tricks. When she saw the email with the subject line, "For Atlas," she almost deleted it, too. It was too short, too simple. But something in those 3 sentences made her pause. It wasn't asking for anything. It wasn't bragging. It was just a quiet statement. Asterisk, your dog isn't broken. He just speaks a different language. My daughter understands that language. Asterisk, she had been there through all the failed attempts. She had seen the look in Atlas's eyes, a look not of anger, but of pure panic. On a whim, she printed the email and placed it on top of the stack of papers for Alistair's morning review. Alistair was in a foul mood. Another trainer had just left, this one using a high-pitched whistle that had made Atlas cower and whine. The challenge was a disaster. The news channels were now making fun of him, and the knot in his stomach was permanently tight. He shuffled through the papers on his desk, his eyes glazing over. Then he saw it. The short email on the plain paper. He read it once. Then again. He just speaks a different language. The words buzzed in his head. Everyone else had tried to force Atlas to understand their language commands, treats, dominance. What if they had it backwards? A deep, tired part of him, the part that just missed his friend, was curious. Who was this daughter? What did she understand? Set up a meeting, he said to his assistant, his voice rough. Just a meeting. Tell them no promises. And no media. No one can know. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. When Elena got the call, she almost dropped her phone. She had to ask the polite-sounding woman on the other end to repeat herself. An appointment? At the Vance estate? For tomorrow? She stammered a yes and hung up, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked at Lily, who was sitting at the table, methodically sorting a bowl of mixed beans into little piles by type. How could she explain this to her? The noise, the new place, the strange man? The next day, the drive to Laurel Heights felt like traveling to another country. The streets grew wider, the trees perfectly trimmed. When they reached the giant iron gates, Elena gave their name to a speaker. The gates swung open silently. Lily stared out the car window, her body very still. A sign Elena knew meant she was holding a lot inside. A serious-looking woman met them at the front door and led them not into the huge mansion, but around the side to a stunning backyard. It looked like a park from a magazine. In the center of a large flat lawn was a beautiful wooden structure more of a cozy house than a kennel, and inside it they could see the shape of a large dog, pacing. Alistair Vance was waiting for them. He was taller in person, and he looked tired. He didn't smile. He gave Elena a quick, dismissive handshake and glanced at Lily, who had immediately moved behind her mother's legs, her face half hidden. So, he said, his voice all business, you think your daughter can calm my dog? It sounded less like a question and more like a statement of how silly the idea was. Elena took a breath. She'd like to try, but she needs to do it her way. No instructions. No one telling her what to do. She just needs to be near him. Alistair scoffed softly. Everyone has a method. What's hers? Singing? Dancing? Just being, Elena said, simply. He waved a hand as if to say, get on with it. He expected the mother to push the girl forward, to start some routine. But Elena just knelt down beside Lily. She spoke softly, not to Alistair, but to her daughter. She pointed to a nice spot of grass under a big, shady tree, far from the kennel, but within sight of it. See that nice spot, sweetheart? Would you like to sit over there for a little while? Lily looked from her mother to the spot. Then, without a word, she walked over. She carried her small blue backpack. She didn't look at the kennel. She didn't look at the billionaire. She sat down on the grass, took off her backpack, and unzipped it. Alistair watched, arms crossed, already feeling impatient. This was a waste of time. A girl pulled out a small, worn cloth bag. She opened it and poured out a collection of smooth, round stones she had brought from the park. She began to place them on the grass, not randomly, but in a line. Atlas had stopped pacing. He was standing at the edge of his kennel, his nose pressed against the mesh screen, watching. His ears, usually pinned back, were perked up. Lily started on the second row of stones, placing them in a slow, deliberate curve. Then a third, the curve growing wider. She was making her spiral. As her hands moved, steady and sure, she began to hum. It was a single, low note, so soft it was almost lost in the breeze. Her whole world shrank down to the grass, the stones, and the rhythm of her own breath. Alistair was about to say something, to ask when the real test would begin, when he saw it. Atlas had stopped pressing against the screen. The dog's heavy panting, a constant sound since the strangers arrived, was slowing down. Atlas took one slow step out of his kennel into the sunlight. Then another. He didn't come towards Lily. He just stood there, watching her hands move, listening to that faint, repetitive hum. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Atlas didn't bark. He didn't tremble. He simply watched. His tail, always tucked, was held low but relaxed. He let out a long, shuddering breath, a sigh that seemed to come from the very bottom of his lungs. Alistair felt the air leave his own chest. He hadn't seen Atlas stand that still, that quietly, in over a year. He looked from the giant, fearful dog to the small, focused girl, and for the first time, the arrogant certainty on his face began to crack, replaced by a slow dawning, bewildered awe. He didn't understand what was happening, but for the first time in a very long time, neither Atlas nor the little girl seemed afraid. The silence in the garden was something Alistair Vance had never heard before. It wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a thick, peaceful quiet that seemed to settle over everything like a blanket. The only sounds were the distant call of a bird, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and that soft, steady hum coming from the little girl under the tree. He found he was holding his breath. He slowly let it out, afraid that any sudden movement or sound would shatter this impossible moment. He watched Atlas. The dog had taken a few more tentative steps onto the lawn. He wasn't looking at the girl directly anymore. Instead, he had lowered his head and was sniffing the grass near his feet with a curious, calm intent. His muscles, usually coiled tight with tension, looked loose. Alistair turned to the mother. Her eyes were fixed on her daughter, a look of such fierce pride and tenderness on her face that it made him feel like an intruder. He had to clear his throat before he could speak, and even then, his voice came out quieter than he meant it to. "How long has she been doing that?" He whispered Dot. The mother didn't look away from her daughter. "Her whole life," she said simply. "It's how she makes sense of the world. When things are too loud or too confusing, she makes her own pattern. It helps her feel safe." Safe. The word echoed in Alistair's mind. He had built walls and hired guards to feel safe. He had made millions to feel secure. This child created safety with a bag of stones and a hum. And the dog? He asked, still unable to fully believe what he was seeing. "He feels safe too," she said. "She's not asking anything of him. No one is. He can just be. That's all he's ever wanted." Alistair looked back at Atlas. The dog had now lain down, curling his large body into a resting position. His head was up, ears softly pointed towards the girl, but his eyes were half closed. It was the posture of an animal who was alert but not alarmed. It was the posture of a dog who was finally, truly off duty. A sharp, practical thought cut through Alistair's wonder. This was just a few minutes. His challenge was for 1 full hour. Anyone could be calm for a few minutes. The real test was endurance. Could this strange, quiet magic last? He straightened up, the businessman in him taking over. "This is promising," he said, his voice firmer now. "But my offer was for 1 hour of documented calm. Not just sitting quietly. Real, verifiable calm. No anxiety, no pacing, no distress." The mother finally looked at him, her expression guarded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we do it properly," Alistair said. He pointed to the patio area, which had stone flooring and comfortable outdoor furniture. "We'll set up there. I'll have my assistant and my security chief observe and time it. 1 full hour. If Atlas remains calm, truly calm for 60 minutes, with your daughter, then the terms are met." He saw the flash of fear in the mother's eyes. She looked at her daughter, who was in her own world, then back at the huge dog. She was weighing the risk. This was no longer a spontaneous moment in the grass. This was a test, with pressure and strangers watching. She can't do it with people staring, the mother said firmly. It won't work. She'll hit. He'll feel it. Alistair thought for a moment. He was used to getting his way, but he had also just seen proof that his way didn't work. He made a decision. Fine, the observers will be inside, watching on the security monitors. They will see and hear everything, but they will be out of sight. You and I will watch from here, far enough away. But the rules stand. 1 hour. Clock starts the moment she is in position. The mother knelt down beside her daughter. She spoke in a low, gentle voice, explaining what was going to happen. The girl listened, her fingers still touching her stones. She didn't nod or smile, but she stood up, carefully collecting her stones back into their bag. She looked towards the patio, and at Atlas. The dog had lifted his head when she stood, but he didn't get up. He just watched her. Slowly, the girl walked towards the patio. Atlas stood up then, but it was a slow, careful movement. He didn't bark. He didn't run. He simply followed her at a distance, stopping at the edge of the stone patio as she walked to the center and sat down. Alistair's assistant, watching from the monitor inside, started the timer. The girl took out her stones again. She began her spiral. The hum returned, a little softer now, as if she was soothing herself, as much as the space around her dot. Atlas stood at the edge of the stone, uncertain. The new surface was different. He took one hesitant step onto it, then another. His nails clicked softly. He circled once, twice, and finally he lay down. Not at her feet, but a few feet away, close enough to be near, far enough to feel he had an escape. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. On the monitor, Alistair's security chief, a man who had seen a lot of strange things, just shook his head in disbelief. The dog's not even panting. He muttered dot on the lawn. Alistair watched, his earlier arrogance completely gone. He was witnessing a kind of communication he didn't understand. It wasn't in words. It was in shared space, in rhythm, in the quiet acceptance of another being's presence. Dot at the 30-minute mark. Something changed. Atlas let out another deep sigh. He shifted his weight, and then, in a movement that was so slow it seemed to happen in slow motion, he began to crawl. He inched his massive body across the stone, not towards the girl's face, but towards her side. He stopped when his head was right beside her leg. Then, with a final gentle thump, he rested his heavy head on the ground, his nose almost touching the edge of her stone spiral. He closed his eyes. The girl didn't stop her humming. She didn't reach out to pet him. She just continued placing her stones, one after another, her other hand now resting lightly on the grass. Palm up, tears, unexpected and hot, sprang to Alistair's eyes. He blinked them away, ashamed. He looked at the mother. She had one hand over her mouth, and she was crying too, but hers were tears of pure joy. The hour ticked down. When the timer finally chimed softly inside the house, the sound was barely a whisper in the garden. The girl was still humming. The dog was fast asleep, his flank rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The spiral of stones was complete, a perfect, beautiful circle leading inward. The hour was over. The challenge was done. And in the quiet of the afternoon, something had been fundamentally changed for everyone present. For a long minute after the timer chimed, nobody moved. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath, afraid to break the spell. Alistair Vance just stood there on the lawn, staring at the scene on the patio. The sleeping dog. The little girl, now quietly tracing the lines of her finished stone spiral with one finger. The late afternoon sun painted everything in a warm, golden light. He felt a strange hollow space inside his chest where the knot of frustration had been for so long. It wasn't empty, though. It was filled with something new, something like awe and a deep, Humbling shame. He had been so wrong. He had thought he could throw money at a problem of the heart. He had turned his friend's fear into a public spectacle. He had judged this child before she even stepped onto his property. The weight of his own arrogance felt heavy on his shoulders. Finally, he took a slow, careful step forward. The girl's mother moved at the same time, and they met at the edge of the patio. Atlas didn't stir from his sleep. The girl looked up, her eyes calm and clear. "It's over," Alistair said, his voice rough. He cleared his throat. He did it. You did it. He wasn't sure who he was talking to, the mother, the girl, or the dog. The mother knelt and wrapped her daughter in a tight hug. "You were amazing," she whispered into her hair. She looked up at Alistair, her eyes shining. "What happens now?" Alistair nodded, a man of his word, even if he was a changed one. "Come inside," he said. They left Atlas sleeping in the sun, knowing it was the best rest he'd had in years. Inside the grand house, Alistair went to his study. He sat at his desk, pulled out a heavy checkbook, and filled it out with a steady hand. The number was large, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a payment for a service. It felt like a debt being repaid, and a terrible apology. He handed it to the mother. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she looked at the amount. A future for her daughter was written there in ink. She swallowed hard. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. But Alistair wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, looking at the quiet girl who was studying the pattern of the wood grain on his floor. "How?" he asked simply. It was the only question that mattered. How did she do what a dozen experts couldn't? The mother thought for a moment. "They were all trying to talk to Atlas," she said. "They were speaking in their language commands, tricks, dominance. My daughter, she doesn't always understand words either. The world can be too loud. So she listens in other ways. She listens to what a person or an animal feels. She didn't see a bad dog. She saw a scared creature. And when she's scared, she needs the world to be predictable. Quiet. She made a little piece of predictable, quiet world for him, and she just let him know he could share it if he wanted. She didn't ask him for anything, not even to be calm." Alistair let the words sink in. She didn't ask him for anything. All the trainers, all the methods were demands. Asterisk, be calm. Obey me. Do this trick. Asterisk, this child had offered a gift instead. A safe place to just exist. He looked at the girl. "What's her name?" he asked, realizing he'd never even asked. "Lily," her mother said. "Lily," Alistair repeated. The name suited her. And Atlas, he understood her gift. "He did," the mother said, smiling. In the weeks that followed, the story did leak out, of course. A billionaire, $1 million bet, a little girl, and a fearful dog. But the version that spread wasn't the one Alistair had expected. It wasn't a story about a silly stunt. It was a quieter story about understanding. He didn't hide from it. For the first time, he used his money and his influence not for pride, but for something else. He called Lily's mother. "The money will change your life," he said. "But can I? Can we try to change a few others?" He set up a foundation. Not a flashy one with his name in big letters, but a simple, thoughtful one. Its first project was to fund a new animal-assisted therapy program at the specialized school Lily would now be able to attend. They brought in gentle, rescued animals to work with children who found the world overwhelming. And the program's very first therapy consultant was a large, handsome German shepherd named Atlas, who had learned that not all strangers bring chaos. Some bring peace. And every Sunday afternoon, a car would arrive at the small brick apartment building. Lily and her mother would get in, and they would drive up the hill to Laurel Heights. The butler would have a simple picnic blanket ready on the lawn, and a little bag of new, interesting stones he had collected during the week. Alistair would often be there, sitting in a chair a respectful distance away, reading or just watching. He saw Lily teach his once terrified dog to play, not with loud throws, but with a game where she would hide a single stone under one of 3 cups and slide them slowly around. Atlas would nudge the right cup with his nose, his tail giving a gentle, steady wag. He watched as Lily, over time, began to point to things in the garden, a bird, a flower, and make a soft sound, sharing her world with her mother. He saw Atlas lie beside her during these moments, a calm, furry anchor. The $1 million had built a bridge between 2 worlds that should never have met. But the real wealth, Alistair came to understand, was what happened after. It was the sight of his best friend, sleeping deeply in the sun, free from his ghosts. It was the sound of a child's soft hum, blending with the wind in the trees. It was the quiet understanding that sometimes the strongest language has no words at all, and the most powerful magic is just kindness, offered without any demand for a reward.